Today is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I'm Michelle Susbury Hill, along with my husband, Anthony Bernard Hill. Today, we will be interviewing Mr. W.O. Wood. We are here in person with him at the Depot Museum and MKT Railroad Depot in the Grange, Texas. This interview is in cooperation with the Fayette County Historical Commission and part of an oral history collection that preserves the history of individuals, families, culture, and important events in Fayette County, Texas. Mr. Wood is a member of the Commission, a very active member of his community, and has a wealth of information surrounding the history of Fayette County. We are so excited to talk with Mr. Wood today and share with you some of that history. And now we will start the conversation with our special guest.
Good morning, Mr. Wood. How are you today?
It's a wonderful day today.
All right, we're very glad to be here with you today. And first of all, just to get started, we're just going to start with a little bit background about you, about yourself, and when and where were you born?
I was born right here in the Grange, September the 5th, 1948.
Okay, what? Okay.
My given name is Willard O. Wood, Jr. And my dad, he worked on the railroad when he got out of the Navy in 1946. He went to work on the railroad, working out of Smithville, Texas. So that's where we were living at the time when my mother was carrying me, but her folks, her mother and daddy lived here in the Grange. So as the time came due for me to be born, she caught the passenger train, rode down here to the Grange, got off here at the depot, and Grandpa picked her up and took her up to the house as she went into labor. Then I was born at the old wooden hospital, two-story hospital, screened-in porch. And there's so much history in that old hospital. Dr. J.C. Ginther gave me my first spanking, brought me out. And a few days later, went back to Smithville on the passenger train. Daddy was working up in Waco as a hostler in Belle Meade, Texas. And his job was taking the steam engines as they were serviced in Belle Meade, taking them up to the passenger depot in downtown Waco. So eventually, Mama and I got on the passenger train and rode back to Waco, Texas, where Daddy took us. And my earliest memory is living in the barracks there there's an Air Force field. Was it Connolly Air Force, I believe, and the barracks were all turned into housing projects. I remember everything was covered in tar paper, so they called it Blackland Village. And a little house there, and it was up off the town. My brother and I was probably 3 and 4 years old. He's a year behind me. He was born here at the hospital also. But anyway, my earliest memory is crawling under that house there at Blackland Village, and he and I were playing with a broken soda water bottle. And I cut my finger real bad, and they had to take me to the hospital, and they sewed my finger up. That's my earliest memory of myself. And I don't know, probably maybe 3 or 4 years old. And as Daddy got better, could hold the job better, and not be on the extra board, he bought a 90-acre farm out at Chalk Bluff, which is about 10 miles outside of Belle Meade. And we grew up on the farm there. But we would ride the passenger train down here to the Grange because we rode on passes. Since Daddy worked on the railroad, we had a pass. We could ride any passenger train in the United States. And so that's what we did. We rode the trains around. That was our growing up, our adventures. Adventures were on the train. We never had a model train. You know, you see these models and stuff, these kids got these model trains. We never had a model train. All we had for the train was a block of wood we'd play in the sand with. And but Daddy always was taking us on train rides on the engine. I got to run an engine one time. He was taking the passenger engines on the steam track up to Belle Meade down to the passenger depot, which is about 3 miles through Waco. I can remember sitting up there, I believe I was 6 years old. I I got to blow the whistle, man, at all these crosses. That was so cool. Got to blow the whistle. Then he would take the incoming engines, after they took them off the train, put the new ones on, back to the steam track up in Bellmead to be serviced for the outbound train, another outbound train. Those were early memories, and eventually Daddy's folks lived down here. They had come up from down in the Freeport area to get away from the humidity down there. The air was better. My grandpa Wood had lung problems, so they moved up here. And so Daddy wanted a job more out of Smithville where he could hold the extra board. The extra board, at the time, you'd get called, you may have to go to Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, Denison, Smithville, and Galveston. That's right, there's a train running out of Galveston also. Nobody really wanted the extra board because there was a lot of running around, a lot of traveling. Daddy would buy a new pickup every 3 years. He's putting so many miles on them. And in 3 years he'd have it paid off, so he's ready to buy another one. He just kept rotating his vehicles because the extra board kept him busy. So we moved to Smithville, and that's where I started second grade of school, and graduated in '67. And I enjoyed my high school days there. We had friends. We had a get together Saturday. Saturday we had to get together of the 36 seniors who graduated. We have about 17 that keep showing up. Everybody's getting old, you know. Everybody's got problems, but we're still around. Like I said, I graduated in '67, and I had a good education. Enjoyed high school, and I applied for, well, the superintendent was a roommate of President Johnson. Then Johnson and San Marcos, they went to school together, and they roomed together. So Mr. Blackman, our superintendent, took me over to San Marcos and got me almost like I didn't have to fill out any papers. All I had to do was show up. He had pull. And so I got admitted to Southwest Texas State Teachers College. It was still that then, SWTSC. And I was going in pre-dental. He's pushing me to get a dental degree. All right, that's fine. That's how I registered. Had a lot of fun that freshman year over there. Run out of money though. So I had to go back to Smithville and enroll in Glenn Junior College, which they were running a bus out of from Smithville to Brenham every day, so we could ride the bus and stay at home, but we didn't have the dormitory expenses. So I got through my sophomore year there, and I thought maybe I want to be a policeman. Well, I applied for a DPS school. DPS trooper, got accepted to that, but their next class wasn't going to start until January the 1st, and this was in June. I said, well, that's a long time, you know. So I applied for Houston Police Department, got accepted there, but their class wasn't going to start until October. My daddy always kept us working. We always had some kind of job somewhere. So he wasn't going to let me sit around until October. So he got me a job down at the shops at the railroad, cleaning out gondola coal cars. They would come in and be emptied with white rock or gravel from Georgetown. They'd leave a little bit at the bottom where they couldn't get to it. And the railroad had a contract for the pipe that was going to the bomb factory in Waco. They had to be swept clean. My job that summer was cleaning those cars out and sweeping them out because they had to be swept clean. And some of them cars had a lot of gravel in them. I could still see that rock laying down there on the rip tracks. But anyway, I decided to get a job on the railroad, switching there at Eureka Yards, that's it, in Cottage Grove. in a Houston suburb there. Cottage Grove was a rough part of town. That's where, when guys got out of prison, that's where they went to establish themselves, to set up or get in more trouble or get a job or do something else. And it was rough. But the railroad, nobody messed with the railroad guys, because there's always a special detective, which we call the gumshoe, around. There's some gumshoe badges there behind you, Anthony, that I've collected over the years. But then I got a letter from the draft board, Mr. Wood. I see you lost your educational deferment. Say, you know, you may be headed for Vietnam. I said, well, my intention, I went up to the meeting in Giddings. So my intention, I get some money, I'm going back to school. She said, well, we'll give you until the first of the year. Okay, so I got back in school in Southwest Texas, and I kept switching. I would switch weekends, I'd switch holidays during the summer. Those old switchmen, they took care of me. On the railroad, to get a job on the small railroad like the Katy was, you had to be kinfolk or know somebody, because as long as they knew you, they knew you weren't going to squeal on them if you do something wrong, you know. So everybody knew me. I grew up around all them railroad guys. I had no trouble. So, and they would even lay off on a weekend so I could work. They were very obliging in helping me stay in college. So then when I graduated in '71 with a teacher's degree, after I did my student teaching in Buda, I saw there was no more respect in the school system. And I had an ag ed degree. I was going to be an ag teacher. But there was no respect. So I had to make a decision. Am I going to teach school for $400 a month, or I can keep railroading for $400 a week? But I kept railroading. This was in May of '71. So I worked that summer, and in October, they called me up if I wanted to go to firing. Firing an engine was, a fireman was kind of the training class to become an engineer. So I said, yeah, they signed me up as a fireman. I was a new hire fireman. I was number 2 out of 4 that session. So I worked with these old head engineers. Oh, they were a sight. These are guys that had hired out back in the 20s even, 20s and 30s. The young guys were the guys that hired out right around the early 40s for World War II, but then they could, even if they even got drafted, but if they are growing up, most of them went to the Navy. And, but they held their seniority. So you got your seniority date of, say, October 1941. You go into the service, and when you come out of the service in 45 or 46, you still got your seniority date. It carried over, because your years in the American services, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, counted against your seniority. So they come out in pretty good shape, seniority-wise. And I worked with, the oldest guy I worked with, I guess, was, we're going to use names, was Saturday Night Mays, Mr. Mays. Oh, he was a rounder. And they're in Smithville. These old heads, there was one guy, Floyd Pryor. He hired out, I believe, in 1917, and he was still working. That old engineer, he was long and scrawny and skinny. We was cutting the engines in two one day down at the port. Man, he jumped back up on that engine, running the cab there, and grabbed an air hose wrench. And he run out on that running board, wham! he killed him a rabbit, big old swamp rabbit. Killed him a rabbit. He took that rabbit and skinned it and dropped it in the water cooler. Well, all we had was like a 10-gallon galvanized water cooler with ice in it. That's what we drank. We had a couple, we didn't have bottled water, so we didn't have any water to drink. Well, they went over to the store, he bought probably a 12-pack of soda water and brought back. So y'all drink the soda water. Here's a train coming, that's gonna be good. And but them old guys, like I say, my daddy, when he'd come in, he'd drive 100 miles to a squirrel hunt. So we ate a lot of squirrel growing up. You'd see a rock train going by, going to Houston. Yeah. This one in the window, boy, that's great. And it's going down to Dollar Up Yard. They go down there off of Port. They shove it down there and the X on it. Yeah, that's where it's going, Dollar Up. But I learned a lot from those old heads. When I would get forced to work with the younger guys, I cost them $4 a day, $4 a shift. They didn't like that. And it ate on them. Because I was costing them $4 a day. Then, after a while, by the time I got promoted in February of '73, we got paid $4 a day to have a fireman. Because he became a trainee then, fireman, and he was supposed to transfer and teach this fireman to student. Well, I didn't have any seniority then, so I went down to Houston and took the Salty, which was the Eureka to Gallatin run. Nobody wanted that job. I worked there for almost 3 years, Gallatin to Houston every day and back. That was a lot of growing up on that job. Saw a lot of fatalities, suicides, cars, hit a lot of cars. We hit a gas truck down at Webster, 7 people got killed. It's crazy. But in 1975, I was able to hold the job out of Smithville regular. And so I went to Smithville to work. I had bought a farm in '72 here in the Grange, out behind the chicken ranch there. And I bought 150 acres. And so that's where I lived. There, I had a bedroom in an old dairy barn that we had. And they would call me, I'd drive to Smithville, which is 25 miles to go to work. And I'd run trains from Smithville to San Antonio a lot, Smithville to Georgetown, Austin, Granger, Waco, Houston, and San Antonio. And I was able to hold a regular job, like I say. As these old guys started retiring, my seniority started moving up pretty fast. I never had to work the extra board. That was good. I always had a regular job. If I had to work the extra board, they might call you to go work with switching in San Antonio for somebody's vacation for a couple of weeks. And you always had to be by a phone. Didn't have cell phones. All we had was landline. Somebody had to be by that phone all the time. So that's how you got your call. If you missed your call, you didn't get paid, but it was a ding against you too. I could be 3 times out on the board. At the time we had like 12 turns on the board. The board was where they had your names and with your crew and how many times you're going to work. I could be 4 times out, but if that first man misses his call, that second man, he might not have been expecting his call, but maybe they could find him. And the third man, if they missed the call, he sure isn't going to be ready. That fourth man's not going to be ready. And by the time you get on down, everybody's missing a call, and then they call an extra man if they can find one. But you had to be by that phone. And then we got a beeper, a pager. Boy, we thought that was a high cotton then. But then you had to find a phone, which was easier than having to sit by the phone all the time. And then guess what? Here comes cell phones. Wow, what a revolution they were. We didn't have to be by the phone all the time. We could still talk to our families at home and keep up with things. And in 1978, I got married. I met my wife on a blind date down in Houston. Got her, she had a 9-year-old son. Got them moved up here to Grange to the farm, bought a mobile home. Had air conditioning, man. First time we had air conditioning. And it was nice. And she was 8 years older than I was. And she was my rock. I knew I had to marry a strong woman. There's so many, the divorce rate on the railroad was so high. A weak woman wouldn't put up with the husband being gone maybe 2 weeks at a time. And she's having to take on all the responsibility of raising kids or taking care of animals, taking care of business. A strong woman could do it. The divorce rate was probably around 66%. Probably 2/3 of the guys wound up divorced. And but it worked out. I got to, the biggest joy of my career was working with the firemen. But they were called trainees then, engineer trainees. And some of them called them 6-month wonders. You had about 6 months to make an engineer out of them. And that was my biggest joy. And I trained 17 engineers, and I was proud of them, real proud of them. I was a stickler for detail, especially on the rules. I knew the rule book verbatim. When a trainee couldn't pass the test, our old rules examiner, Jimmy O'Brien, JMO, he would send them to work with me for a couple of months. I'd tune them up. I'd get them through the rules test. And the rules wasn't all of it. Operations was a lot. Down here, all the way down to past Cat Spring, it's a rolling hill territory. It's just up and down, up and down. You don't have any flats. And once you get to city, to Houston, it's all flat. There's no problem. But you have to run these heavy trains through these, what we call hogbacks. You know, a hogback is like this. You have to run that train. And the Katy was always light on power, and just 1 horsepower per ton. And the ruling grade out of Waco was Eddie Hill. And if you got over it, you could lighten up as you got on down south to Granger. You'd set out at Granger for the stuff going to San Antonio. And so you lighten your load, and you can really roll. Then down here on what was South Texas Division, from Smithfield to Houston, the ruling grade was Fayetteville Hill. If you got over Fayetteville Hill, you're doing pretty good. You'd get out with 100,000 tons with 10,000 horsepower. That was 4 GP40s. GP40 was rated at 2,500 horsepower. And so you had your horsepower. If one of them engines wasn't pulling like it's supposed to, you didn't have the horsepower, your subject lay down on a hill. And if you laid down, that means you couldn't go anymore. That's just all you could pull. The brakeman would cut behind 20 or 30 cars, and the rear brakeman and conductor would stay with the train. And to protect it, and we'd go to the say go to New Ulm and set those 20 cars out. Because then once you made New Ulm, it was almost downhill to Houston. And set those 20 cars out, go back, get the rear of your train down there around Cummins Creek, and take it up to New Ulm, pick up your 20 cars, hook up and go. And you didn't have any problem after that. Biggest time, they would store rock trains there at New Ulm. A rock train was usually 80 cars, which was 100,000 tons. No, 10,000 tons, I'm sorry. Yeah, 10,000 tons. Okay. Mr. Clarkson, who's our superintendent down here, good guy, we tried to please. The Katy was like a family. You wanted to make things work. Yeah, you might have to bend some rules and do this and do that, but we wanted things to work. Because one thing, everybody knew everybody, like a small community. When everybody knows everybody, you know their business too, and you want to help each other. You don't want to put anybody down, because you get that reputation is not good. You had guys that, I don't know, they were scoundrels. They didn't care, and they were kind of, they didn't get along with the group, so to say. But we left Smithville with 80 cars of rock, 4 engines. We got down to New Ulm. Mr. Clarkson wanted us to pick up that other train. That's another 80 cars. Yeah. Boy, that was a booger. Because the biggest job was having to shove those 80 cars back up to our train at New Ulm on the side of that hill. I got way down there, almost to Hickson Hill. And here I come back out of run. So the car back up there, he was there with a radio in his car, so that helped. We didn't have to pass signals. Got that joint made, got the air pumped off, made an air test. He took the rear brakeman back to the caboose, brakes released, and here we started rolling off. And didn't have any problems until we got to the city. 160 cars of rock. The old timers, they didn't like setting air anything over 100 cars, because the brake system, they weren't all ABS, it was automatic brake system. The brake system wasn't all automatic back then. In other words, you had some slow releasers. They released with the pressure in the brake pipe. You didn't have any saved air. And when you got a train that's 1.5 miles long, it's hard to get air back to that rear car. Okay, so we had a yellow block dropping off in the city. It's a block system, had a Santa Fe interlocker. I didn't want to sit in the air. So I topped that little hill there, about 15 miles an hour. Gonna roll down there, and I was gonna stop. I have to get serious about stopping. Because it's almost on the side of a hill down there to that interlocker. But that home block is around a little curve, you can't see it. And I was smoking them engine brakes. They didn't have 4 units. That's 8 axles of engine brakes. That wasn't much, but it had them bunched up. And got around that curve down there and had a clear signal. So that was all. Let's go. Rolling on down there. Across Brookshire Bottom there, where you cross the Brazos River, it's all flat, no problem. Then you go up into Brookshire, there's a little hill there. It's not much of a hill, but when your tonnage is twice the rating, it becomes a problem. And I almost laid down. Man, by the time we got to that north switch at Brookshire, them old engines, they were huffing and puffing. And we just barely made it over that hill. And rolled on into Houston then. But then we started running coal trains in 1978. Grange built the power plant down here. LCRA did. And Austin was in on that. They started building in '74. I remember that I bought a new GMC pickup in '74. Well, things were going to get good. So I bought a new pickup. And I even talked to LCRA about hiring on out there because they're going to have a lot of railroad action handling cars out there. And I had a cousin, Charlie Von Minden. He was head of personnel, head of hiring. And I talked to him. He said, well, see, I'd already had 74. I had 8 years seniority, 8 years with the railroad. No, 6 years, 68. And he said, well, Wood, you know, I can put you to work. He said, but in 20 years, you're going to have to retire. Then what are you going to do? You have to find a job. In 20 years, you're still going to be, you won't be but 45 years old. So you're going to have to find a job. So these LCRA guys, that's what they do. While they're working for LCR, they got a side job already. So you've already got a pretty good job. So I stayed with the railroad. But I got to take the first coal train from Smithfield to LCRA. We were running BN power. Katie bought, I believe, 30 SD40s, which were, to us, were big engines. And today, they're not very big compared to the modern power today, but back then, boy, they were hogs. And pulled that train into LCRA, had road foreman engines with me, Tommy Burleson, see that everything was working good, and pulled up in that hill. It's a hard pull up in there when you got to stop line the switch and pull in. There's a hand throw switch then off the main line. And it was quite a deal. Finally, they started using a limo service to haul crews around. But rear brakeman, he'd ride the limo down there and have the switch already lined for you to go in. That was a big help. Then you didn't even have to slow down for the conductor to line the switch up behind and catch the caboose. This is line the switch, this is caboose, this is pickup, this is set out, this is sidetrack, this is number 3, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is 2 twos. You got 5, you got 6. You got 5 and 1 is 6. 7 is like you're rolling dice. 8 is 2 fours. 9 is this. The main line is this. 10 is an X. And you just keep counting. You had to learn to communicate with signals, hand signals. You didn't have walkie-talkies then. And you talked back and forth with each other using hand signals. And just these new guys, you can give them a signal, they don't know what they're talking about. House track, oil mill, compress, it just caboose, head in, rear end, it just, but it's a different thing now. I'm glad I'm not working with all the stipulations these young men had now going to work. They don't understand having to work on holidays, weekends, not being at home. They don't understand that. When they hire out, they want time with their families, and I understand that. And I always said, you've got to make the wife happy. The way you make her happy is on payday. You give her the check. A railroad check's a pretty good check, but you give her the check, but she feels like she's handed the money then. Of course, you're running the bills up, and she's got to pay them. And these young guys, they don't want to invest any equity into the job. I worked 30 years before I could hold a daylight job, a regular daylight job with weekends off. 30 years it took me to be able to hold that job. And these young guys, and I believe it's because of the cell phones, they don't even have to go for a job interview if you're looking for a job now. You do everything online. I know it's an advancement in technology. I'm on the bottom end of that cell phone computer technology. I know that. I'm just on the bottom, and these young guys, even kids, man, they already know how, they can show you how to use a cell phone. They can run for themselves. It's amazing. But they're raised with it. We weren't raised with it. We didn't even have good radios on the engines where we could talk to the dispatcher and stuff for years. They would put towers in, intermediate towers, we call them repeater towers, to just have communication. Once they did away with the train orders, oh yeah, I gotta get back to the depot here in a minute. They did away with the train orders. Back in the day, about every 10 miles you had a depot, had a station that was working. It had it's called agent telegrapher they call them, working. And they would talk to the dispatcher in Denison, and that's how he was dispatching the trains to that man, say, down here in Grange. He'd ring up on the dispatcher's phone, ring up the Grange, whatever the signal was. They used the Morse code system, the telegraph. They did it, that dot-dit dash system. And whatever LaGrange's was, LaGrange said, LaGrange. And the dispatcher said, copy 4. And you can copy 4 train orders. Whenever he got the agent got his stuff all laid out there, he said, LaGrange copy. The dispatcher would give him an order, say maybe order 798, whatever the date was, Grange, Texas. Train number 3 meet train number 6 at Addix, Texas. At Addix, they didn't say Texas, at Addix. And you had to spell all that. Train, T-R-A-I-N, number 6, S-I-X, meet, M-E-E-T, number 6, S-I-X, at Addix, A-D-D-I-C-K-S, J-M-O. Dispatch, that's how he closed the order. They put his initials under the last word. And the agent would have to copy that back, read it back to him that he's got it. Then he got the 4 different orders. Might have been a slow order, might be another meet, might be a wait order. They say, okay, that's clear train number 3, LaGrange. Then he would give him a clearance. That was, he lists the train orders, location, date, train, location, and they put the number of the orders, and the agent would put his name there, and staple to those 4 orders, and put them in the hoop out there to go by. And he changed the train order signal to red. But that train coming south out of Smithfield, he'd have a red board. He knew he had to get orders. If the orders weren't there, he had to stop. But if the orders were in the hoop, he could keep going and he'd hoop the orders up. When the caboose come by, he'd catch his orders. And then you'd read your orders and you knew you had to meet that certain train down there at Addix. And southbound trains, because they were the loaded trains, were superior to the northbound trains. And so you knew the southbound trains could hold the main line, and the northbound train would take the siding at Addix. That was all by the rule book. But along came your repeater system, where you could put orders out on the radio. You didn't have radios in these little depots back up until probably on into the 70s. And but then you could put out an order. LaGrange, the radio train number 6, and he'd give him an order on the radio, and it was the same procedure. The dispatcher would give it to the agent would read it back to the dispatcher, then he'd give it to the train read it back to the agent, and they'd get an okay on it and sign off on it. It was all by rules. Every rule in the rule book was created by an accident. And when I went to work, we had a little rule book that would fit in your pocket. It was about the size of this here. When I retired in 2008, the rule book was so big, you had to have where you had to have a satchel to carry it in. It was so huge, so many orders. Then you had to have the rules for the different railroads that you were working over, and everything was just getting very confusing. That's how the wreck happened down there, and I believe it was Los Angeles, might have been San Francisco. The metro train, which was a commuter train, the engineer, he was texting on his cell phone, and he was supposed to stop at a signal, but he didn't stop and kept going and hit a train coming around the curve. All these people got killed. And then the rule came out, you couldn't have your cell phone, you couldn't use your cell phone anymore on duty. You couldn't use it, period. Because we were still using, that was about the time I retired, but we were still using the cell phone to call the dispatcher for instructions, and we were using it in our work. The conductors even had a railroad issued cell phone they could use. But after that, you couldn't even have the cell phone turned on the engine. It had to be turned off and in your grip. Don't let me forget the grip, that's a story in itself. The train master would pull up there to get up on the engine. The other guy would be down there in the car. He'd be talking to the guys on the engine, and if he heard the phone ring, you were fired, because it wasn't even supposed to be turned on. And that's how strict it had to get. And because even like the automobiles, now you know, they're trying to make it where you can't drive and talk. I know I can't drive and talk, because I wasn't raised with that. I didn't know that. That was a learned thing that I had to learn. I can sit and talk to a person beside me in the car, no problem. When you're talking on that phone, it's like your concentration is different, at least for myself. I can't multitask like that. When I was in college, man, we'd be listening to the radio, be watching TV, be doing our lesson work all at the same time, and maybe talking to an old gal on the phone, you know, but you could multitask. But as you get older, your reflexes and your mind just aren't that fast anymore. I would hate to be in an airplane. To me, that's the worst scenario. In an automobile, that's pretty bad. A train is pretty bad, but you got your feet on the ground. That pilot up there in that airplane, he misdiagnosed something that he was supposed to do, and you know, I guess that's why they got a co-pilot. That's one reason they try to keep 2 people on the train. They've been passing laws. It's gone from 5 people that used to be on the train. 5 people. You had an engineer, you had a fireman, you had a head brakeman, you had a conductor, and you had a rear brakeman. There's 5 people on a train. You know, one man could overlook something, but you had the other people to compensate, to pick up where the other guy left off. Now you got just 2 people on the train. You don't have that backup power there. They're wanting to cut the operation of trains to 1 man. They're even talking about running them by computers. But that's like these automobiles now, driverless automobiles. You don't even have to have your hands on the wheel. But you know, somebody's got to be there when that car don't want to work. I'll be there starting to find that out. They're starting to find out these people are texting on the phone, running up under these semi-trucks and getting their heads cut off and stuff. But it'll get there. The people, and it's not the young people, it's multi-generational. You have to realize the consequences of your actions. Like seatbelts. Seatbelts, man. We didn't even have seatbelts in the car. We didn't even have turn signals in the early days. you stuck your arm out. You want to go right, you want to go left, and you want to stop. Those are your signals. I believe in 1954 is when they started requiring turn signals in an automobile. Well, technology has progressed, like I say. I've seen the biggest advance in technology in communications. Not just on the railroad, but nationwide. Google. I never had a study hall class in school where I could use the library. I knew the library was there, but I never had a class where I could go to the library. When I got to college, we had a brand new 8-story library. There was a floor for history, a floor for English, every floor had a designated field. And you used the Dewey Decimal System to find what book you wanted. You youngsters now, all you got to do is go to Google and say, I want this, and there it is. It's a wonderful thing. You've got the whole world right there on that phone at your fingertips, that little computer. That's what it is, a computer. The whole world is at your disposal. They're talking about they're going to eventually have the screen in your eyeglasses, and you can talk. Some of y'all may know about talking to what's this, Alexa or whatever it is, and she'll do whatever you ask her to do. And I haven't met that lady yet. It gets real frustrated enough when I get on my GPS system in the truck. It tells me I'm supposed to turn here, I'm supposed to turn there. You're going to turn in 200 feet, you're going to take a right. And I'm over here in 3 lanes over in the left lane. Well, it hadn't told me that, what lanes to be in. It said the new systems tell you all that. My GPS system is 20 years old probably. It don't even have the speed limits right. I was in a car the other day riding. Oh, he was riding down to Waldeck to give out groceries. And going through Rudersville, speed limit is 50 miles an hour. Mark, his truck, he's the one that fancy Ram trucks, told him. Speed limit is 50 miles an hour, you're going 62. Slow down. It said that, I told him that. I thought, mercy sakes alive. I'm W.O. Wood Jr. here in Grange, Texas. The W.O. stands for Willard Otto. My dad was a Willard Otto Wood Sr. The Willard come from Jack Willard. He was a prize fighter back in the 19-teens there. And Otto was my grandmother's brother. That's where all that come from. Daddy there were 7 children in the family. There was Noli, Nora, Melvin, Jim, General James, Willard Otto, and Marvin Ernest, who was called George. Okay? And they come from down around Clute, Freeport area. My Granny Wood, her name was Jessie James Ritchie. She come from up at Marlin, Texas. My Grandpa Wood, his name was General George Wood. He come from Atlanta, Georgia. He was an orphan. He was riding a train, he was riding the rods under a car in the train, riding the rods. There's rods under there running to your brake rigging and stuff. When you got under there to ride, I was called riding the rods. But anyway, the train stopped in Marlin, Texas, and my granny, Jessie, their house was right there by the railroad tracks. They were tenant farmers. And my grandpa Wood walked over there to ask for a drink of water. That's where he stayed. And he married my granny. And they wound up down there in the Lake Jackson area, because that's where the jobs were down there. Dow Chemical was building down there. This was, I believe, around 1900 or so. And they had these children, and they farmed out. And in the 40s, 1940s, Grandpa's lungs were bad from Dow Chemical working, and they moved to a farm up in Fayetteville. That's how they wound up here in Fayette County. Now, on my mama's side, they were German, and those roots go all the way back to Germany. The Callers, that was John and Frederick, they come by boat in 1845 to Texas, come through Galveston. They walked up to Cat Spring. They got to Cat Spring, they had a sponsorship. They had a sponsor because they'd bought a sponsor out of Germany. In other words, if you had a sponsor, you had somebody you were going to, somebody who was looking for you. If you weren't sponsored, you were on your own. But they had a sponsor. So when they got to Cat Spring, they went over towards what is now the Round Top area and settled in what was called Clear Creek, which today is Oldenburg. If you didn't have a sponsor, you had to keep walking. You went back towards New Braunfels and Fredericksburg, but up that way, because you're on your own. But once they got to Oldenburg, they settled on a farm, and that, of course, they started having children, and they were farming. They had about 180 acres there they were farming, and of course, as the children went out, my grandpa was the second oldest from John. His daddy's name was John, but he come from the Frederick side. Frederick had a son named John, and that was my grandpa's father, in right in 1897, I believe. But anyway, Grandpa had like 7 brothers and sisters, but he married my grandmother. She was one of the Pennsylvania Dutch, and they had come in, and she was a von Minden. But my Grandpa Frederick, he married a Schmidt from down at Cat Spring, and she was over the water German. In other words, she had immigrated also and settled in Cat Spring at Schmidt. And that's something else I want to say. When I was walking through cemeteries, you would see these conch shells. Conch shells were those shells you could hold up to your ear and hear the ocean, you know. And some of these markers have a conch shell on them, and that designates they came over the water. They came over the ocean. And then I found out the palm trees at Galveston, that was the first thing they saw from the ship, because the palm trees were the tallest thing there. They'd see the palm trees, they knew they were close to land. That's why a lot of them have palm trees up here. I never realized that. That was the first thing they saw. And okay, we got my grandma, von Minden. She was von Minden, Lena Callers, and she was one of 7. And her father was John von Minden. He ran over a child in his wagon leaving Fayetteville and killed it. And when he got home to Rudersville, he committed suicide. He couldn't handle killing that child. So my grandmother, von Minden, had raised the 7 kids herself. She died in 45. I never did know her. Mama remembers her. My mother was Bernice Callers, and my grandpa Kyler's, his name was Louis Frederick, LF. And my mother was named Bernice Ida Kyler's. Of course, then she became a Wood. They had 3 children. I was the oldest of the child. I had a brother 14 months behind me. His name was General Lewis Wood. General for my paternal grandfather and Lewis for my maternal grandfather. Then in '54, we were still living in Waco on the farm. My sister come along. She was Nina O'Neill Wood, and she was named for some people my dad had met at Pearl Harbor. And that's something else too. At Pearl Harbor, he met these people who had the Hilo Hotel, Nina and Leo Lycurgus, and they were giving the sailors so much aid and everything, and Daddy connected with those people, so he named his daughter that. Don't let me forget the submarine story, Pearl Harbor. Okay, like I say, we had a loving family, we were tight, but Daddy was never home. He worked on the railroad. That's why I said I would never work on the railroad. Daddy never saw us play ball, but we were athletes. We played ball. Daddy was never there. He might see us practice some, he'd come out, but he was, on weekends and Friday nights, he was never home. He never saw us graduate. Didn't even make our graduation. I said, I'll never work for the railroad. Don't ever say never. Never is a long time. I run out of money if I go to Vietnam. I worked on the railroad. So I said, you know, I'm tall. Well, I hear them, the Vietnamese aren't very tall, and I might stand out. And, but it is what it is. It all worked out, come together. But my grandmother and grandfathers, Grandpa Wood died from bad lungs. And they finally moved from Fayetteville to the Grange. He lived on the Brown place up here, because he was having to go to the doctor, Dr. Ginther, the one who brought me into this world, every day for lung treatments with his lungs. And they didn't know it then. It probably caused from asbestos and all this stuff. But he was breathing the sulfur fumes and all that stuff what Dow was doing. And but they moved to the Brown place, which is where Linwood is now. And that's kind of where I would come in here and spend weekends and holidays and summers. I'd ride the train. I'd ride the passenger train down here. And it was walking distance. It wasn't not even half a mile up there. Live on the farm, or help on the farm. Because they were farmers. They were renting this property, and Grandpa and Grandma Kyler's. Grandma was a nurse, and she would help and take care of a lady about a hospital named Miss France. I can remember, I believe it was 1953, I'd come down here on the train from Belmead, and I was playing out in Mrs. Francis' yard. She had that big, tall house and everything, big house, nice house. I wasn't supposed to go inside though. And they sent me to get the cook hadn't showed up yet. They sent me, the cook had a garage apartment above the vehicles there. And I went up there, can't remember what her name was. I remembered it here a while back. Anyway, she was deceased. I run back, man. I was hollering and squalling. And Miss, forget her name. But then Grandma, September the 5th, my birthday, and we had a radio station that just started up. She got on to play How Much Is That Little Doggy in the Window for me, for my birthday. So, man, that's pretty good, you know. Probably my 6th birthday. Where can we go now? Family, just.
Any special friends
I
you want to
had
name?
my uncles. I had my Uncle Melvin, my Uncle Jim, my Uncle Bunch. His name was General James. He was airborne, 84th Airborne. He was dropped behind the lines on D-Day. But they all came back. They had memorabilia they brought back. Daddy, he was in the Navy. Right. It was 4 brothers. They all in the service. And I was real close to my Uncle George. He was the youngest of them. And he wasn't much older than I was. He was only 18 years older than I was, so we were close. But then I had my brother. When he joined the Navy out of high school, he joined the Navy. His name was General. Oh, that didn't work. So we don't have any generals in the Navy. So they changed his name to Gene. No generals in the Navy. And he served on the aircraft carrier Hornet. And my Uncle Jim, he was on the Yorktown when it went down, and he survived. Daddy was on the submarine. They were off the coast on December the 7th, 41. Pearl Harbor got hit. But they were submerged. They were about 100 miles from Pearl Harbor yet. They had left San Francisco going to Pearl Harbor. Daddy was a machinist mate on the submarine. That's what he did. They heard all this going on, and the guys wanted to go up top. They didn't have one machine gun, some kind of turret gun or something on the submarine. But the captain would go up because he said, you know, we'll get sunk. If we get sunk, they don't have anything. So they made Pearl Harbor that evening, that night, and it was just terrible. It was just terrible. Flesh burning, just people. Daddy was, well, they were rescuing and survivors and stuff, but Daddy had, like the policies, always had the shakes. That was from when the Japanese, later in the war, were dropping the depth charges on the submarine. You could hear that depth charge bounce off the submarine. And you could feel it when it exploded. And Daddy was a basket case, and his mentality was affected by it, and the whole bit. Back then, we didn't know about these things that soldiers know now, you know. And the engineers that I worked with, 4 of them who were in World War II, 4 of them committed suicide. 4 of them. And and these are guys I grew up with, people I knew. Oh, Pap Ritchie, Bull Cameron, not Jack Ansia, but Jack Hawkins, C.L. Ferris, they all 4 committed suicide. And Tom Hancock, he committed with alcohol. He just drank himself to death. But I haven't been to war, I don't know. My brother, he got out of the Navy, he busted out, he married a lady from Nebraska, went to Chicago. That's where he went to work for IBM there. And he did good for himself. My sister, she worked in Houston off and on, and she finally married a fella that lives in Arkansas now. And she's still alive. Well, my brother died in 19, my mother died in 19, Daddy died in 85. And they go. They go. My dad was in the Navy. He enlisted in 1940. Before that, he was working at the CCC. That was Conservation Corps, something. Conservation, CCC. I don't know. up in Oregon, in a national park up in Oregon, and they building facilities. And he joined the Navy there in 40, so he could start making a little income to be sent back home. It's with the CCC Civilian Conservation Corps. He was making 50 cents a day, and 25 cents was being sent back home. Because in the Navy, he could send $1 a day home, so he was going to move on up. And he did his basic in San Diego, and they put him in submarine duty. And he shipped out for Pearl Harbor sometime in the fall of 1941 on the Pompano. That was the submarine, the Pompano. And then when Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, they were still about 100 miles from Hawaii, and they were underwater, and they heard all the stuff that was going on at Pearl Harbor. And the guys, they wanted to surface, and they could run faster for one thing on the surface. And they had one gun, a machine gun or some kind of gun that they could use that would mount. But the captain wouldn't go up because he said, you know, at least they still had their submarine. When they got to Pearl Harbor that evening, it was just chaos. All the fires burning. You could smell the burnt flesh, and it wasn't nice. It was just so chaotic. Stuff was going on, and of course they worked the rescue, and they never could cut through the hull of one ship. They could hear the guys down there beating on the metal, and then on later during the war in the South Pacific, they'd be underwater. The Japanese would be depth charging them, and they could hear the depth charges bouncing off the hull of the submarine, and you didn't know if that was going to be the one that's going to blow the submarine apart, or if you're going to be okay. And Daddy had the shakes after that. Always had the shakes. With us, Parkinson's disease, but it was nerves. And like I say, but he never would talk. These old guys never would talk about the bad stuff, what they had seen and what they had done. And I've tried to explain, just like on the railroad, you don't talk to someone who hasn't been there and explain to them, because they can't understand what was going on. On the railroad, I've had people walk miles to commit suicide by train. They've hit cars with automobiles with children in them. I've seen bodies laid out on the right of way where the van had got hit. It was full of family. They were just lay there covered with sheets. And the worst one I was ever in, I guess, was we hit a gas truck down at Webster. And the truck, it blew up and killed 7 people in the cars around it. We blew on through it. And I wouldn't make a statement. I was fresh. I didn't know what was going on, what to do. So I wouldn't say anything. So they took me to jail. And so I called my superintendent at Eureka at Houston. He ain't going down there, he said. So I called my big boss up in Denison. He said, Mr. Johnny would be there as fast as he can get there. And he did. Mr. Todd called Mr. Jonovic. He come on down there, come to the jail. How did they say, we hit a truck. That's all you got to say. I said, okay. I run into Mr. Todd a couple of weeks ago. Everybody respected Mr. Todd on the Katy Railroad. He had a photographic memory, and he was our boss. He was the top of the echelon, whatever, as far as we were concerned. And he remembered the incident. And but there's lots of memories made on the road. Lots of memories right here in this old depot. I'd ride in here as a child. I remember the car would stop back on the crossing, and Grandpa Kyler's would be sitting here in his car. If he had like a '54 Buick, he'd pick me up, take me up to the house. And it's always good memories here. And over the years, this is where we would pick up our paycheck, the guys here in the Grange. One time there was 7 of us working here out of the Grange. This is where we'd get our check. Smithville boys would get their check in Smithville and so forth. They would mail our checks here. And Fred Sands was the last agent working here. Mr. Woody worked here. I remember him working. I believe Miss Woody worked some. But Fred Sands was the last agent that worked here. And he wound up at Elgin. And I believe that's where he retired from. But the agent, he was responsible for the inbound and the outbound freight. They shipped a lot of chickens out of here because there were so many chicken hatcheries. That's where these farmers, they would make their, so to speak, milk and egg money, raising little chicks. They'd incubate them out and then they ship them out of here. But we had hatcheries here too, and so that was a big outgoing thing. Milk cans, I remember milk cans. My Uncle George out there, Plum, he would drop that milk can down in the water well on a rope so it would stay cooler down there. In the morning, he'd put that milk in there and set it out by the mailbox here. He got this little pickup by, picking up all the milk cans along the way, and he'd leave you 2 empties. He'd pick up 2 and leave 2. I remember that. All right, that's the way it worked. We had a milk processing plant here where HEB is now, and we had the oil mill was on down past the milk plant, and they had railroad tracks that run across the beefhead ditch, and we would had a spot, Stokes and Stone, there, the monument place. We had a carload of marble. We had to have a buffer car to shove that car of stone over beefhead ditch because the engines were too heavy. It wasn't built for that. And they tore all that out whenever HEB built another. They started hauling the milk then to Houston to be processed. Lever Andrews hauled our milk. We had a dairy out in the country and we were milking. We milked from 63 to 69. And we weren't milking but 30 cows. But 30 cows was too many whenever the electricity went off. You had milking by hand then. Otherwise you had milking machines. And, dairy business is kind of like you don't ever have time off. You got to milk twice a day, every day. That's why when I went off to college, we stopped milking. Didn't have any help. What we're going to go into now?
Okay. The depot here, the museum, and how the preservation of this all came around.
Yeah. Back in the 90s, the depot's empty. It started out, the railroad gave it to the city. The city rented it out to a flower place. What do you call a flower place?
Florist?
A florist, yes. And she worked in here a while, and she moved out and made it into a hairdresser, a beauty salon. And she moved out a while, and there was a rent-a-movie place. And when they moved out, that was it. So they're going to sell this to, the city's going to sell it to Brazier Motor over here next door. They're going to tear it down or move it or something, but it wasn't going to be here because they wanted this parking lot. There's a group of citizens, there's the Linkeys, Gary and Gail Linkey, Mr. Arnold and Susie Romberg, Doctors Kylers, and Dr. Elva Cowlers, Royce and Elva Cowlers, and myself and Charlene Wood, we came together, raised the funds to buy it from the city. Then we got a grant for restoration, and after we restored it, we donated it to the city under a lease contract where we would run it, but the city owns it. And it's worked out nice. We used to have it open Saturday and Sunday. Then as COVID came along, people weren't moving around much. On Saturdays, we get a lot of out-of-town traffic coming in here. I was getting a lot of people from Bryan College Station, especially. The Asians were coming down here, but there's so much history here in this Fayette County. And a lot of people come out of Houston, and I said it's just 2 hours out of Houston, it's an hour out of Austin, hour from Bryan College Station. And there's so much to see when you come down here. But you have to know the places to go. I try and send them to the courthouse and to the old jail, and if they want to go to Round Top and the casino hall, and it just, but people are just, I call it prowling. That's what we do. You just prowl around and see what you can find to look at and see. But the depot has done well. We've come together, we've got a lot of old railroad artifacts. Back in the 80s, we were working and throwing so much of this stuff away because it didn't mean nothing. You find an old lantern, you just threw it out there in the ditch. A switch lock, you try to throw it over the fence. You didn't have to mess with it anymore. And the antique shows started running out there at Warrington and Round Top. And I started seeing railroad stuff. You know, fellow got to start saving some of this stuff. Because if you don't, it's all going to be gone. So I started collecting Katie stuff. I tried to concentrate on Katie stuff. There's so much of it out there. Then in the year 2000, I got my first computer and I found about eBay. eBay was like going to the Astrodome, full of nothing but railroad stuff. It's awesome, awesome. I wouldn't keep up. I'd buy and order so much stuff, I had to start cashing in savings bonds. But it all worked out. It all worked out. We saved a lot of stuff. Some of the guys, they wanted model trains. Well, I never had a model train. I couldn't tell you nothing about model trains. They could tell you everything about it. But you got to have stuff for children. Got to have some kids stuff in here to keep them coming in. And we got 2 little boys now that they're on top of things. And there's interest here. It's just a matter of drawing them in, keeping it open. It's just getting the young folks involved in anything now is so hard in the community interest because it's taking both parents to work to support a family. I volunteer here at the depot. I volunteer at Second Chance, which is a resale shop. I love sale days, but I love during the week when you're putting everything together because it's a social hour. I volunteer at the food pantry. I pick up 3 days a week at the food pantry for Feeding America, which goes to the pantry. Last year, I picked up 69,000 pounds of food that used to be thrown into the dumpsters through Feeding America. I am a volunteer for hospice to work with patients who just want somebody to sit with them or talk with them. Just somebody to show that cares. I work with my church. I sing in the choir. I run cattle. I belong to 2 cattlemen associations. Just when you retire, I think it's time, if God's gonna let you stick around, you need to step up. That's what Jesus wants you to do, is to serve. And like I say, Jesus wants us to feed the hungry, and that's what we do. At Waldeck Saturday, we fed over 100 families. We gave out over 8,000 pounds of food. We ran out of foods, and that's once a month. It's just, there's a need, and the need is increasing in our society. We won't always be here to meet that need, but hopefully the young folks will start stepping up someday. Younger folks, but there's more retirees too. I'm 75 years old now. I'm still getting around. I thank the good Lord for that. Thank you, Jesus. He still has a job for us to do. So I have a problem. I can't say no. If somebody needs help, somebody needs something, I have friends say, you just got to learn to say no, but I can't. I can't do that. My daddy never could say no. My daddy could go any place squirrel hunting, fishing, because any place he went, he had something in the truck. It might be a bushel, it might be some corn, it might be, he might have picked up lettuce or turnips or something out of the farmer's market when he got off work. Or one time he come home with the bed of the truck was full of M&M chip candy that was going to be disposed of. He said he's going to feed it to the hogs. Well, we found out who the hogs were, you know. Just think, a bed full of truck full of M&Ms, man. It was, what's the name of that candy? Royal Candy Company down there, that's right. We would switch it on the railroad. And there was Colonel's Cookie Company. He'd come home with a truck full of cracked cookies or something. And out in Houston in the Heights, there was Cry-Pack Pies. They're on Spring Street. He'd come home, boxes and boxes of fried pies. He always had something when he went to see somebody. He was always welcome. And he was just, that's the way he was, that's the way I am. I'm giving up my time. Basically, that's all I've had to give over the years. But I have time. Still have time on my hands. That's a blessing.
As part of the Fayette County Historical Commission, you're part of that. What kind of things do you do there?
The Fayette Historical Society, I've written articles. I wrote an article on the railroad running through Fayette County. I wrote an article on the Woodsbury Cemetery, where the workers were dying when they were building the railroad through here. And that was the Texas Bastrop and Houston TB&H Railroad. That's burying them in the right-of-way, putting a stone over in the cemetery. I'm writing an article now on the Brown Place, which is up where Linwood is now. I wrote another article somewhere. I'd have to look back, and I'm secretary of the Historical Society now. I stepped up, and we meet twice a month. We always meet in an interesting place, a place, even if it's a second time place, we have new people. We had a meeting at the pantry last week. There's only 2 people there that had been into the new pantry. And so we had 27 people there all together, which was a good turnout. There's just so much to tell here. And that's why I'm doing this recording, is history has to be recorded. I used to listen to the stories from my grandparents. I never did know any of my great-grandparents. But my grandparents, and it was kind of like in one ear and out the other. We didn't pay attention. I've always said things skip a generation. My grandchildren will be more interested in my stuff than my child is. But the way technology is now, that may not be true any longer because it's easier to record and to save technology. You don't have to write it down anymore. I started writing a book one time. I didn't get very far. I can't write as fast as I can talk. When I took typing in high school, I was in there with a bunch of girls, but I learned to type. I could type 126 words a minute with no errors. I was faster than the fastest girl. Coach Rogers wouldn't let me go to UIL. He said, because you ain't never going to have to use typing for a work condition. He said, we're going to let Geraldine Zimmerhansen go. So she did. I could beat her in typing. I wish I took shorthand too, though. So when I got in college taking notes, I had my own shorthand. I used some chemistry. I used a little of this and a little of that, and just. But I survived. But typing has always been. We got an old typewriter in here, an old Royal typewriter here in the depot. Children have never seen a manual typewriter. Well, that's what we learned to type on. Boy, we had one electric typewriter in our typing room. One electric, and it had that ball on there. That ball moved so fast. That's when Geraldine got used. I was using a banger, an old banger, man. I could beat her in typing. The kids know about the keyboard. There's two different keyboards. There's this keyboard, and is it a Belgian keyboard? Is that the name of it? There's another keyboard that's different. I don't know what it is. Somebody pointed that out here a while back. But this is the standard keyboard now on the computers and the cell phones. These kids, they're raised with these phones, man. They can tell you, 4 years old, they can tell you what to do with them. That's beyond me. I had a flip phone until about 2 years ago, and the girls at church were so embarrassed. They gave me one of their old, started out with an iPhone 4. Now you can't even give them away. I do Santa Claus. Yeah, I do Santa Claus. And these children, I don't want an iPhone 10. I got a bunch of 4s over in a box. You want one? No, I don't want no 4. I want a 10. I ain't got no 10, man. Them going to adults. I got these 4s. No. I want a puppy dog. The puppy dogs are scarce. I got a donkey. I'm trying to get rid of. This donkey is a good donkey, but he's biting Rudolph on the tail. He's irritating Rudolph. And Miss Bobby Nash, she's my Miss Santa. She goes right along with me too. Yeah, that's the kid. That's why I do Santa Claus. That's why I got into hospice, so I could go into the nursing homes. Nursing homes wouldn't let Santa go in there. And this year, I believe I did 17 Santas. This past year, 2022. I've done as many as 20, 26, and 27. I've done 3 in one day before. But the big deal is when Santa Claus comes in here on the train. One time we must have had 300 kids here. Santa sits right here in his chair. Every kid gets to sit. Mom and Dad take pictures, and he gets to tell Santa what he wants, and he gets a candy cane. This year, I believe we had about 125. It was good. And the railroad works with us on that because they get good publicity. We give them thanks. We give them credit. That all started out, I was working in Flatonia, had Mike Love was train master out of Smithville, and he was a mop guy, which was the Missouri Pacific, out of his dad worked out of Longview on Amtrak, and his daddy during Christmas he was Santa Claus on the Amtrak train from Longview to Fort Worth. Mr. Love, that's right. he said, Wood, why don't you do Santa Claus? I said, well, I believe I had started doing Santa Claus. He said, come in on the train. I said, well, you line it up, we'll do it. Yeah, I had already started doing Santa Claus around. So he did. That first time I come in here, the wind was blowing so hard, it almost blew me off the front of the engine. Man, it was so windy. But the parking lot was full. And there was a skating rink set up there on the street in front of the courthouse, and this center of town was so full of kids, man. It was heartwarming. And a lot of ho-hos there. A lot of candy canes go out. I don't buy the candy cans like I used to, but I used to buy about 600 of them and put them in my sack. What it went into then the old candy canes, it didn't go. They had to sit through the summer. And the candy canes sit through summer, they get soft and kind of like jelly, and cows won't even eat them. Now, that's a good one there, because with the food pantry, back in the days, we'd have so much bread left over because we didn't have the volume of clients coming through our old facility, which was an old Army barracks. So we didn't have any refrigeration, and it just, I had so much bread left over, I call it shucking it, taking it out of the wrappers and putting it in feed tubs and feeding it to the cows. The cows would go crazy. They beat my old pickup up so bad, I finally gave it to my son, and he's so embarrassed to drive it, he won't even drive it. It's so beat up. But it was my cow truck. That's what I fed out of. Then I finally got me a side-by-side, and I can drive along and put cubes out, because they would knock me down. I was getting too old to get knocked down by them cows. Been run over by them. I got so big and fat, weighed 400 pounds, I couldn't get out of the way anymore. And, you know, my wife laying up there in the nursing home, that empty bed over there by her, you know, I'm gonna wind up in here if I don't do something. My doctor, Blackwell, he'd been after me about losing weight. Got old, can't burn it off like we used to. We're not as active. Fatality rate on the lap band and the bypass and all that was about 10%. I didn't like that. But finally, the sleeve, that's where they cut your stomach down from what it is down to where you can only hold 8 ounces. The fatality rate was 1 in 1,000. I can live with that. So I did it, lost 160 pounds. Got my 2 new knees done. I feel good. I can get stuff done now. I feel like doing things again. I'm living again. Just can't eat as much. Still drink a few beers every once in a while. I had something on the railroad. When I first went to work on the railroad, of course, everybody knew everybody. Everybody was family. Like I say, if they didn't know you, you weren't going to go to work there. You'd have a stranger come and you'd think he was a spy, so you really kept your act clean. I was pulling pins on a 3 o'clock job at Eureka. And the guys all went into the yard office to get their switch lists, their assignments. They handed me their 5-gallon buckets. Because our 5-gallon buckets is where we had our lantern and our rain gear and our lunch, whatever else we need. So go ask our buckets down at the ice house, down at the roundhouse. There was a big wooden, like a dock that was all insulated. It had that big old chunk of ice in there. I said, all right. So I gathered up those 4 buckets. Here I go. Open that first bucket, there's a 12-pack in there. Ooh, okay. Each of them had a 12-pack of Schlitz beer. So I put ice in there on them, took it back in them. Thought that was my job, icing the beer down. They'd walk around, they'd have a beer can stuck down in their glove. So you can see it. You couldn't see the can itself. They just walk. You don't carry your glove like this. You wear your glove, you know. You can't set glove down because it won't set. It's not like a koozie. It didn't have koozies in it. That glove was a koozie. The old superintendent, Mr. Strickland, G.L. Strickland, he hired me. He must have knew everything, but everything got done, everybody was safe. And the reason it was Schlitz Beer, Schlitz Warehouse up there was called Hillman. They got a switch in the morning off of the 7:30 job. And you get one switch a day. So they would spot like 6 loads, 6 cars of beer at a time. And they'd moving that Schlitz. This was in '69. All right. Then about 3 o'clock, they wanted another switch, but they would have to pay for it. They didn't want to pay for it, but they already had the routine down. So he'd go to the 3:59 job or the 3:30 job up there to give another switch. When that engine come out of the warehouse, the running boards were full cases of Schlitz beer. They didn't get charged for it neither. When I left Sunday night going back to San Marcos to school, I was driving a Camaro then. I had 6 cases of Schlitz beer in the trunk. So I was very popular in San Marcos. When I was a freshman, I remember when I was a freshman over there in '67, Stanley Iconin from Lampasas, he was my roommate. Lampasas, Texas. Somebody said it was Coors beer. Something about Coors beer. So I had a '67 Ford pickup then. We loaded up my Ford pickup. We had to drive all the way to Belton, Texas. That was the boundary line of Coors beer then. Belton, Texas, Fort Hood. I believe we bought 20 cases of Schlitz beer for $4 a case. We took it back to San Marcos and sold it for $10 a case. Now we was in high money. About the 3rd trip, we took Stanley's truck, and he coming back on them back roads. We done hit a old pickup. I mean, an old pickup. It was, I mean, like it was back in the '50s type pickup on one of them back roads. So we stopped. It was a dadgum constable. A constable. Conan was a talker. I was just scared. Conan was a talker. He wound up with a bachelor's in business. He got out and stood up at that constable's door, and they went talking. He come back. He said, "Come here." Told me, "Come here." He said, "Get 2 cases of that Coors." And he got 2 cases. We put 4 cases of Coors back at that constable's truck. Nothing was ever said. Oh, boy, that's politics. That's politics. That's almost as good as the chicken ranch. Man, you know, Daddy was always hustling watermelon patches. He would buy a watermelon patch over at Luling, and we'd drive around these towns, sell them out of the back of the pickup. We were kids, 10, 12 years old. One summer, he had a buddy. He had a flatbed dual, probably a 2-ton truck with a bed on it, full of watermelons. They took me down there to Surfside, dumped me in all them watermelons under some kind of shed there on Surfside Beach. That's where I stayed for 2 months. Every week they bring me another load of watermelons. Man, I hate sand to this day. I hate the beach. So much sand. But boy, I had a lot of fun. Anyway, back to the chicken ranch. Daddy'd have a pickup load of watermelon. We'd go out there to the chicken ranch. Miss Jessie had it then. He said, "You boys unload these watermelons here." And Tiny, that was my brother's nickname, Tiny. I unloaded them watermelons. We got to walk around them barns and sheds out there. We never could find them dadgum chickens. And Daddy went in and get paid. I suspected how he got paid. But we still ain't found no chickens. And we looked and looked. Didn't know any better. That's the way things were. You know, the people that had been here since It's been out there in the country, I believe, since 1917. Before that, the house was there. It was called, not the camp, but it was there where the old high school is, across from HEB. That was a bad part of town there. So the school board, they passed a bond and they bought that property. What did they call it? It had a name. I've seen it, but it was a bad part of town. And bought that property and built the school so that the house of ill repute had to move out to the country. But before that, it was located up here on Main Street by Carrie Inn. And that was on the edge of town then. As town grew up around it, they had to move, so they moved over there to Shantytown. It was called Shantytown. Before that, they down on the river at the end of Lafayette Street where the ferry came across. There was no bridge running. The ferry come across, there was a saloon there and a house of ill repute and everything. And that got shut down whenever they built the first bridge across the river. They relocated, so that's when they relocated up there on Main Street. I guess every town has its ill repute. When I used to work up at Taylor, the girls, they stood around right out there on the curb soliciting. Fort Worth, we stayed at the Blackstone Hotel. Lord have mercy. It was just wide open. Allen Park Inn, when we stayed in Houston, at Allen Park Inn, it was working girls there. There's always working girls. That's just what it is. Say whenever Camp Swift in Bastrop was built, they run buses down here to the Grange. Not just the laborers, but the soldiers there at Camp Swift. It was built, Camp Swift was built to originally be a prisoner of war camp. And they would farm, F-A-R-M, farm the prisoners out as laborers. Because they were very, what's the word? They were very skillful. They were very skilled in their, especially their machine work and stuff and furniture making. And they could get them for a little bit of nothing. All they had to do was feed them. That way the government didn't have to feed them, and whoever was using them fed them. They used them in the road work and stuff, but they were very skilled laborers. And I've seen a lot of that in Bastrop, in the Bastrop County history. Grange was a very tight-knit community back in the day, and it's always been the county seat, so we always had good business here. Had lots of mom and pop stores. And about every 5 miles out you had some kind of little mom and pop grocery store, beer joint, but that would always be walking distance from the fields, 5 miles. The railroad was built, you had something every 10 miles. You had a little community. But then every 5 miles, especially back down the cotton and corn country and everything, where the field workers could go 5 miles together, so it was closer. And but everybody knew everybody knew everybody's business, everybody wanted to take care of your business too. But when I never really noticed it, because I was a local, so I was treated as a local. I belonged. But whenever I married my wife in '78, brought her up here from Houston, she wasn't a local. And she started pointing out things where she could walk into a store and they wouldn't even ask her if she needed help, wouldn't wait on her or anything. But she didn't belong. Things were changing here in the Grange, Texas. And as more and more, we call it outside. If you're out of county, you're coming in from out, you're outside. And it takes about 2 to 3 generations to become considered a local. And I've seen it change over the years, especially when Walmart came in and built in 86. All this little mom and pop, there was 5 grocery stores around the square. They didn't last long. City grocery over there, I got called on a train going to Houston one day, daylight, and I stopped by Linky's. They had the Hallmark shop, and it was right next to City Grocery. And I wanted to get something for lunch right quick. So I went over there next door, Mr. Bossick. I bought a little Debbie's box of snacks. Okay, that'll get me to Houston. Went to work, got on the train, heading on down through, got the city, getting hungry. Opened that little Debbie's snack. It was nothing but, not mushrooms, it was like spores in there, just unedible. It looked like something we would have done in science lab to grow some kind of fungus or something, you know. And I told the Linkies about that when I saw them again. They said, "Oh no, you don't ever eat nothing out of that store. It's been there for 20 years, you know. You got to know better." So I know better now. But anyway, Walmart drove the mom and pop businesses out of business. They couldn't survive. The mom and pops, they would sit in these stores and these beer joints and these feed stores and stuff, 16, 17, 18 hours a day. No one may even come through there for 2 or 3 hours, but they were there if someone did come through, wanted to buy a loaf of bread or whatever. And that's why we would always stop out here at Schultz's Grocery out here at Rudesville. That was where we went down our lane back in the day to try and keep them in business, because they were handy. They were local. They were handy. But they all went out of business. The 2 brothers, when they retired, nobody wanted to keep that store open. Edgar, and they were good people. Walmart, even down to the dress shops, the grocery stores were the first things to go. Because Walmart would buy a whole box load of, say, peaches, and they just had to buy a case of peaches, so they couldn't compete price-wise. And so the little business was shut down. And I believe the folks finally realized that, you know, we've got to let the outsiders are coming. We can't keep them out. And today, I saw in the paper where the septic system inspector issued 33 permits for the month of March. That's building permits. That's out in the country for septic systems. And that's how many houses are applying to be built and in Fayette County. And that's just 1 month. So people are coming in. There's no available lots here in town now that are reasonable, so they'll buy a couple acres out in the country and build what they want. And so Grange still has the same 5,000 people, but the county is growing. The population of the county is growing from people coming, they want to get out of Houston. Now, Bastrop County and Fayette County, they're commuting distance to Austin now. The Tesla guy, Musk, Elon, he's built a community out on 969 out of Bastrop for his workers, because they can commute to the plant there on the southeast side of Austin. They're only about 30 minutes out. Here, we've got a 250 spot RV park coming in, because this is commuting distance to the south side of Austin, 1 hour. They can park their RV and they'll commute. People coming from California think nothing of commuting 2 and 3 hours one way. They think nothing of it. Back in the day, the mayor of Houston, I can't recall her name now, she put feelers out about running commuter trains into Houston. I was interested in running the train from Sealy into Houston. Matthew Whitmire. I believe that's right. Kathy Whitmire. But when I checked into it, I'd get on the train there in Sealy, run it into Houston, take the train out by the Astrodome, spend the day, come back in the afternoon and run the train back. It was going to work. So they didn't have any kind of commuter trains in Houston then. Okay? Then we had a highwayman run against her for mayor. We'll have to look that name up. Forget what he was. But his system was pour more concrete, build more highways. They bought the Katy Railroad to expand the Katy Freeway. I-10 is out 6 or 7 lanes each way now. They picked up the railroad tracks. They're no more. The railroad ends at Katy, Texas now. And I was on the Katy Local for 3 years. We was hauling cement, lumber. We used to haul fertilizer and feedstuffs to Katy. Now we're hauling cement and lumber. They're building subdivisions out in those rice fields. They're disking that cement into those fields, watering them down, let it set up so they'll have a foundation. They're building a house there with number 3 lumber. It's not number 2, it's not number 1, it's number 3 lumber. So they think that house will only be there for 10 years. So they will doze that house out and build a newer, a bigger, probably like a high-rise like they did in the Heights, like they did in Montrose. They're not very big square footage on the bottom, but they're 3 stories high. They call them lofts. That's the way to go. You know, used to, you wanted to live outside of Loop 610. If you, boy, you was in the country, you lived outside 610. I was dating a little old gal down there in with Dairy Ashford Road, and they had a dairy. They were in the country. That was in 68. They were in the country. But now you've got the Beltway. Now you've got that 90. I forget what they call that 90 now. To get even out of the city, it just keeps going. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's amazing. But see, Houston can grow out. It's not like New York that had to grow up. Houston can grow out. It's all the way to Wharton. I got a cousin living in Wharton, and it's all the way down there on Highway 59 now. It's just, I used to say, I've been shot at on the train 3 times. My daddy got shot in San Antonio through the arm into his chest. I've been shot at 3 times. I always said, if there's one person that's crazy, 1 out of 100,000 people, that means there's about 30 crazy people right here. Just by numbers, you know? Yeah, I've been shot at 3 times on the train, and I can't think of any fatalities from shooting. We would go in Houston, such bad places, we couldn't get off the train unless we had a gumshoe with us. It was so scary, and we didn't have locks on the engines, and we were securing ourselves. And the railroad rules, you couldn't have a firearm, but I always had a pistol in my grip. Well, if I need it, I'll use it and live with the consequences. But there was just some bad parts of town. In San Antonio, there was parts of town, but the cab drivers wouldn't even go in there after dark. Back down there by Joe Freeman Coliseum and back in there, if we got stuck on a train we needed to ride, cab drivers wouldn't even come get us. It was so bad. I was piloting some East End cruise in the Eureka back in probably '88. It was after the merger. The UP Railroad bought the MKT Railroad in '88. And the Texas Lottery had just started up. And I was standing down at the Allen Park Inn. So I got called to go to work. Cab picked me up. He's taking me back over there to Gas Yard. I said, pull in here this little store. I want to get me one of them lottery tickets. I don't know what they're talking about. I want to get me one of them lottery tickets. So he pulls in there, you know. I get him something to drink, I get me a lottery ticket. I'm standing against the wall outside there scratching it off. Hey, I got a $20 winner. Man, that cab driver done grabbed me by the shirt collar and threw me in that cab. He said, you keep your mouth shut, they'll kill you for a cigarette, let alone a $20 ticket. That's pretty serious. But it is what it is. People have to survive. I was sunning myself out there by the pool at Allen Park Inn one time. Here comes this little Latino boy. He come go swimming in the pool. He wasn't a guest. He come from the hood. And he went to pull his clothes off. He had like 3 different shirts on and pants and everything. I said, where you going? It's too hot. What are you doing? He said, oh man, if the law gets after me, I start sucking clothes. So they're looking for a boy in a red shirt. And the red shirt goes first. Then you got another color underneath it. You just keep going. See, they got it all figured out. Man. But our society, it's a changing. I'm a country boy. I've been called a hick, been called a geek, been called a cowboy, been called a hippie before. And it don't bother me. Don't bother me. I am what I am. I'll stand behind what I believe and what I think. The good Lord has took care of me this far. And He's got a plan for me. I don't know if I'll still be here this afternoon, but He's got a plan. I thank the Lord Jesus Christ for that. I'm thankful for my upbringing. Daddy was hard on us. Daddy wore a 56-inch belt. And when he pulled that belt out of those pants, you could hear that in belt loops, man. You knew he was in trouble, boy. He could reach out with that belt like a bullwhip. And he hands you a knife, tell you go cut you a switch. You're gonna get a whooping. You better not come back with some little old switch. But he'll get a club and work on you then. You better cut something feasible. Get the job done. Brother and I got in a fight one time. We was painting the house. We was painting the house. And I don't know what started it. But he threw a bucket of paint on me. I run him down back in the alley and pulled up a bull nettle and rubbed it in his face. I don't know if y'all know what a bull nettle is, but you don't even touch a bull nettle. But I rubbed it in his face. And we went on about our business, you know. It is what it is. Brotherly love. I wish I could tell him that now. But the Grange has been here since 1817. Strat Buckner, he had a cabin back on the creek. 1817. Old man Moore had a log cabin. It was an enclosure, like a compound, where they could fight Indians out of right over there on the street corner. The water right here was 4 foot high here on the square. It was 4 foot high. And one of the floods. And then they started building the dams up above Austin to control the water a little better. I've seen it up to the edge of the courthouse. And but progress, yeah, we've got progress. We've got electricity now. I went to school with families that didn't have electricity, didn't have running water. Running, you had to run out to the well and draw it on the end of a rope. I know there's people in this world who are still living that way. Third world countries, they have their maladies. We're the greatest country in the world. That's why everybody wants to get here. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. Cut it down.
Okay, well, thank you for spending time with us, sharing your family ancestry, giving us some great historical information about Fayette County and your journey in that and all of that, your career. And we really enjoyed talking with you and appreciate your time.
Oh, you're more than welcome.